The nurse lowered her voice, but the words still landed like a blow. "We're going to need a decision. Tonight." Claire Walker stood frozen at the foot of the hospital bed, the sharp smell of antiseptic burning her throat. Machines hummed. A heart monitor ticked with a thin, stubborn rhythm, like it was arguing with time itself. Eleanor Walker lay beneath the sheets, smaller than Claire remembered, her chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. 63 years of a life spent standing upright now, reduced to the soft rasp of air through a tube. Behind Claire, someone cleared his throat. David didn't step closer. He stayed by the door, arms folded, weight shifting from one polished shoe to the other. His jaw was tight, his eyes flicking to his watch, then back to the hallway, as if this room were a delay he couldn't afford. How long, he asked, not looking at Eleanor, not looking at Claire. The doctor hesitated. Hours, maybe less. David nodded once. Practical, efficient. "Okay," he said. "We should talk about next steps." Claire turned slowly. She studied her husband's face, searching for something she couldn't name. Concern, fear, grief. She found none of it, only calculation already moving forward. "She's still here," Claire said. Her voice surprised her. Calm, flat. "She can hear you." David's lips pressed together. "I know. I just mean, we should be prepared." Prepared. The word echoed hollow. From the corner of the room, Melissa Grant stepped forward. She moved softly like someone entering a church late. Her coat was still on rein, darkening the shoulders. She reached for Claire's arm. Her touch warm, familiar. "I'll stay," Melissa said quietly. "You don't have to do this alone." Claire nodded without looking at her. She leaned over the bed, brushing a strand of grey hair back from her mother's forehead. Eleanor's skin felt cool, almost waxy. Too still. Mama Claire whispered, "I'm here." Eleanor's eyelids fluttered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her fingers twitched, searching. Claire caught her hand, squeezing gently, afraid to use too much force. Eleanor's eyes opened just enough to focus. They were still sharp. Still Eleanor. "Claire," she breathed. "I'm here." Eleanor's grip tightened, sudden strength burning through fragile bones. Her gaze slid not to David, not to Melissa, but to the door, as if she were measuring the room, counting who belonged and who did not. "Listen," Eleanor whispered. Each word cost her. After I'm gone. Bank. First Federal." Claire leaned closer. The machine beeped faster. "Ketan Tuan." Eleanor said the old habit, slipping out. "Safety deposit box, number 447. Claire frowned. "Mama, please, don't worry about that. Now." Eleanor shook her head barely. Panic flashed in her eyes, sharp and urgent. "Promise me." "I promise," Claire said, even though she didn't understand. Eleanor's fingers dug in harder. "Don't tell anyone." David shifted by the door. "What's she saying?" Eleanor ignored him. Her gaze locked on Claire's face, drilling through her. "Not your husband, not your friend. No one." The room seemed to tilt. Claire swallowed. "Okay. I promise." Only then did Eleanor's grip loosen. A faint smile touched her lips. Not relief. Resolve. "Stand straight," Eleanor whispered. "No matter what they do." The heart monitor stuttered. A long, ugly sound cut through the room. The nurse moved fast. The doctor followed. Hands pushed Claire gently aside. Voices layered over one another, clipped urgent. Eleanor's body jolted once, then went still. Time didn't stop. It fractured. Claire stood against the wall, nails digging into her palms, watching strangers work on the woman who had raised her. After a few minutes that felt like a lifetime, the doctor stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said. David exhaled. A release. Not a sob, not a break, just a breath let go. Melissa wrapped an arm around Claire's shoulders. Claire didn't lean into it. She couldn't feel her legs, or her chest, or anything below her throat. Outside, rain hammered the pavement hard and cold. The night swallowed the hospital lights, turning them into blurred halos. Claire stood under the awning, staring at nothing. David unlocked the car. "Let's go," he said. "You shouldn't be out here." At the apartment, the television was already on. A sports anchor's voice filled the living room, loud and cheerful, oblivious. David dropped his keys on the counter and loosened his tie. "I've got an early meeting," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be a lot." Claire didn't answer. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded, still holding the shape of her mother's grip. Melissa lingered by the door. "I can stay," she offered. "Just tonight." David glanced at her, then at Claire. "That's probably best," he said. "Claire needs rest." Rest. Another hollow word. Later, when the apartment finally went quiet, Claire lay awake in the dark. The rain had softened into a steady hiss against the windows. David's back faced her, already asleep, breath slow and even. Too even. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message lit the screen. "Melissa, I'm here if you need anything. Anything at all." Claire stared at the word. Anything. She turned the phone face down. 3 days later, the funeral was small. Grey sky, folding chairs, a pastor who spoke about humility and service. People Claire barely recognized lined up to shake her hand, their words blending together. Eleanor would have hated the fuss. David checked his phone during the final prayer. Melissa cried openly, dabbing at her eyes, squeezing Claire's hand as if anchoring her. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, David leaned in. "I'm heading out," he murmured. "Work thing." Claire looked at him. Really looked. His face was already somewhere else. "Today?" she asked. He shrugged. Life doesn't stop. That night, alone in her childhood home, Claire opened drawers she hadn't touched in years. Old photos, church programs, receipts carefully folded and labeled, her mother's life organized, contained. In the bedroom, the jewelry box sat on the dresser. Plain wood, a carved rose on the lid. Claire lifted it, surprised by its weight. She sifted through the contents, fingers moving automatically until she felt it. A hidden seam, a slight give. A compartment slid open. Inside lay a single brass key, old and worn, stamped with numbers that made her breath catch. 447. Claire closed her fingers around it. The house creaked softly around her. The rain returned, tapping at the windows like a warning. Somewhere beneath layers of concrete and steel, a door waited. And behind it, something Eleanor had spent a lifetime hiding. Claire didn't know it yet, but the storm her mother had warned her about had already begun. The bank lobby smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish, the kind of place that hadn't changed because it didn't believe it needed to. Claire Walker paused just inside the revolving door, the weight of the brass key pulling at her coat pocket like a question that refused to be ignored. First Federal Bank had been standing on this corner since before she was born. Red brick, stone columns, windows tall enough to make ordinary people feel small. Her mother had brought her here once, decades ago, to open a savings account with $50 scraped together from overtime shifts and coupon clippings. Claire remembered Eleanor's voice, then calm and firm. "This place keeps promises." At the front desk, a young teller looked up and smiled. Too bright, too quick. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Claire placed the key on the counter. It made a dull sound, heavier than it looked. "I need to access a safety deposit box. Number 447. The smile flickered. Just for a second. The teller's eyes dropped to the key, then lifted back to Claire's face, searching. "May I see your identification?" Claire slid her driver's license across. The teller typed, paused, then typed again. Her fingers slowed. The smile did not return. "One moment, please." The teller disappeared through a door marked Employees Only. Claire waited. The air felt thicker back here, like the building itself was holding its breath. Footsteps approached. Not the teller this time. A man in a charcoal suit stepped into view. Silver hair neatly combed, expression carefully neutral. He extended his hand. "Ms. Walker, I'm Thomas Reed, branch manager." His handshake was firm but brief, as if he were testing something. "If you'll follow me." They walked down a narrow hallway, past rows of steel boxes embedded in concrete walls. Numbers marched in precise order, each one a small secret locked away. Thomas stopped at 447. He produced his own key, slid it in alongside Claire's, and turned them together. The door opened with a soft metallic sigh. Inside sat a single thick envelope, manila edges, worn as if it had been handled many times, then set down carefully. No jewels, no cash, just paper. Thomas stepped back. "Take all the time you need." In a private room no larger than a closet, Claire sat at a small table and opened the envelope. The first thing she saw was handwriting. Eleanor's. Clean. Decisive. The sight of it hit her harder than she expected. "My Claire, if you are reading this, then I have already stepped out of the way." Claire swallowed and kept reading. The letter did not apologize. It explained. Eleanor wrote about choices made young and paid for over a lifetime. About walking away from a name that opened doors and choosing instead to build something quiet and controlled. About power used best when no one sees it coming. At the bottom of the envelope were documents, lots of them. Trust agreements, share certificates, property holdings listed across states and oceans. Entities with names that meant nothing to her. Amounts written in careful legal language that made her eyes blur. One page stopped her cold. A summary. Estimated value. $2.4 billion. Claire stared at the words until they lost meaning. Then she read them again. 2.4 billion. Her mother who mended clothes instead of replacing them, who paid cash, who never owned a credit card. The final page was a warning underlined twice. Money reveals. Protect yourself. Wait before you speak. Claire folded the letter with shaking hands and slid everything back into the envelope. When she stepped out, Thomas Reed was waiting. He studied her face, his expression changing just slightly. "Would you like me to contact the firm listed in the documents?" he asked. Claire nodded once. She didn't trust her voice. Outside, daylight felt unreal. Cars moved. People laughed. The world continued unaware that something massive had shifted beneath its feet. Claire sat in her car for a long time, the envelope on the passenger seat untouched. Her phone buzzed. "David, did you stop by the bank?" the estate lawyer called. "Said you missed a document signing." Claire stared at the message. Estate lawyer. He had moved fast. Too fast. She typed back, "Yes, I'll handle it." She drove home slowly, every red light stretching. At the apartment, David wasn't there. His jacket was gone. The framed photo from their wedding still sat on the shelf, angled just slightly away from the light. That night, Claire called the number printed on the trust documents. It rang once. Walker Family Office. A man answered. Older voice. Calm, controlled. "This is Claire Walker." A pause. "Then we've been expecting you." They spoke for nearly an hour. The man explained structures and safeguards, blind trusts, and discretionary powers. Everything had been designed to keep Claire insulated, anonymous, protected. Her mother had insisted. "You will not appear on public filings," he said. "Not unless you choose to." When the call ended, Claire sat in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room. The knowledge settled slowly, heavily. She was no longer living on the edge of something. She was standing in the center of it. Over the next weeks, she changed nothing. She went to work. She paid bills. She wore the same clothes. David barely noticed. He came home late, left early. His phone stayed face down. Melissa, on the other hand, came often. She brought casseroles, folded laundry, filled the quiet with soft conversation. "You're doing so well," she said one evening, touching Claire's arm. "I don't know how you're holding it together." Claire smiled thinly. "I don't either." One night after Melissa left, Claire overheard David in the kitchen, voice low, urgent. "I told you not now," he said. "She's still fragile." A pause. "No. She doesn't know anything." Claire stood in the hallway, unseen, her heart pounding. Fragile. The word landed differently now. A week later, David sat her down at the kitchen table. His hands were folded, his expression practiced. "I've been thinking," he began. "We've been drifting. For a long time." Claire watched his mouth move the words, sliding into place. She felt oddly detached, as if she were watching from somewhere above. "I think we should talk about separating," he finished. Claire breathed in. Slowly. She nodded. "If that's what you want." David looked relieved. Too relieved. "I think it's best. Clean. Simple. Clean. Simple." Like everything else he touched. The separation moved forward quietly. No fights, no accusations. David didn't push for financial disclosure. He assumed there was nothing to find. Claire let him believe it. On a cold afternoon, months later, Claire stepped into a small coffee shop near her office. She froze mid-step. By the window sat David and Melissa. His hand rested over hers. Her head tilted toward him, laughter soft, intimate. Not new, familiar? Melissa looked up first. Her smile collapsed. Claire walked over, calm as still water. "So this is what fragile looks like," she said quietly. David opened his mouth, closed it. Melissa's eyes filled. "Claire." "I never meant." Claire held up a hand. "You meant what you did." She turned and walked out the bell, over the door, ringing once behind her. Outside the air was sharp, clean. Claire stood on the sidewalk, the city moving around her, and felt something inside her settle into place. Not anger, not grief. Clarity. She pulled out her phone and dialed the family office. "I'm ready to be briefed on the assets tied to domestic holdings," she said. Quietly. The voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "Of course, Ms. Walker." As Claire slipped the phone back into her pocket, she didn't look back at the coffee shop. The story they thought they were living was already ending. They just didn't know it yet. The conference room lights reflected off the glass table like a calm surface hiding depth beneath it. Claire Walker sat at the far end, hands folded, posture straight, her face carefully neutral. The men and women on the screen did not know her name. They knew her only as a representative voice, one of several trustees dialing in from undisclosed locations. That anonymity was not an accident. It was the shield her mother had built. "Let's begin with domestic exposure," a woman said, crisp, professional. "We'll keep this high level." Claire listened. She always listened first. Numbers appeared on the screen. Charts. Corporate structures nested inside other structures, clean and intentional. It was not chaos. It was architecture. When the meeting ended, Claire remained seated, staring at her own reflection in the black screen. For the first time since Eleanor's death, the fog in her head thinned. She could see the outline of what came next. Not revenge. Alignment. Outside the city moved at its usual pace. A bus hissed at the curb. Someone laughed across the street. Life unchanged, even as hers recalibrated. The divorce paperwork arrived 2 weeks later. David's lawyer was efficient, almost friendly. No accusations, no delays. A clean separation, the kind that suggested confidence. He thought he was leaving with everything that mattered. Melissa texted that night. "I never wanted you to find out like that. I hope someday you understand." Claire read the message twice. Then she deleted it. The next morning, she met with her own attorney. A quiet woman in her late 50s, silver hair, pulled back, eyes sharp with experience. "You're choosing not to disclose," the attorney said carefully. "That is your right, given the structure. But once this is finalized, your window to revise terms closes." Claire nodded. "I understand." "You're sure?" Claire thought of her mother's voice. "Stand straight." "I'm sure." The settlement closed without incident. David kept the apartment. The car, half the savings. $12,000, and a sense of victory that showed in the way he walked out of the building, shoulders lighter, smile, faint but present. Claire watched him go from the lobby window. She felt no urge to stop him. Weeks passed. Then months. Claire moved into a smaller rental downtown close to work. She told no one why. She kept her routines. Coffee at the same place. Same route home. She learned the difference between appearing unchanged and being invisible. Invisible was power. At night she studied. Financial statements, governance frameworks, risk exposure. She learned how decisions were made without faces attached, how outcomes followed structure, not intent. Her mother had not built an empire by acting on emotion. Claire would not either. One afternoon, a name surfaced in a briefing. A consulting firm, regional, privately held. The same firm David had worked for, climbing slowly, always certain the next promotion would come, because it always had. Claire didn't react. She simply asked, who owns the controlling interest? The answer came back 2 days later. A holding group nearing exit, open to offers. She said nothing. She took notes. Melissa's life, meanwhile, appeared perfect online. Smiling photos, brunch tables, engagement rumors. David's hand, always visible in frame, possessive now, proud. They thought the worst was behind them. That belief made them careless. Claire did not watch often. She didn't need to. Information came to her whether she sought it or not. Public records, market chatter, a world that left footprints everywhere. The first acquisition closed quietly, buried inside layers of entities that did not point back to her. The board meeting was procedural. She attended by audio, only voice-filtered presence, reduced to influence. No one questioned it. This was how power moved when it did not need applause. Performance review across senior staff, Claire said when her turn came. No exceptions, no assumptions. There was a pause, then agreement. Reports followed. Objective. Clean. David's name appeared where it always had. Middle of the pack. No disasters. No brilliance. The kind of record that survives only when nothing challenges it. Claire approved the new compensation structure without comment. Competitive, transparent, unforgiving. David noticed the change within a quarter. Bonuses shrank. Projects became scarce. He worked later. Spoke less. The confidence drained from his posture, replaced by irritation, then fear. He complained to Melissa. She told him it would pass. At her own job, Melissa faced questions she hadn't expected. Metrics, turnover, customer feedback she had ignored for years. The chain she managed had new leadership now. No introduction, just expectations. She called Claire late one night. "Can we talk?" Her voice was tight. Claire hesitated, then agreed. They met at a neutral place. Melissa looked tired, older. The glow from her screen life dimmed in real lighting. "I didn't plan any of this," Melissa said quickly. "It just happened." Claire studied her friend's face. She saw the truth there finally. Not guilt, just justification. "Things are complicated," Melissa continued. "David and we're building something." Claire nodded slowly. "I hope it holds." Melissa frowned. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," Claire said. "Just be careful what you build on." The warning passed over Melissa without landing. 2 months later, the performance improvement plan arrived on Melissa's desk. 60 days, clear benchmarks, No room for charm. She panicked, called David. He was already under pressure, his own position slipping. He didn't answer. The night Melissa was finally terminated, rain streaked the windows of their apartment. David sat at the table staring at his phone, unread emails piling up. Melissa cried in the bedroom, the sound thin, desperate. Neither of them knew why this was happening. They blamed timing, bad luck, each other. Claire learned of it all through a brief update. No commentary, just outcomes. She closed the file and leaned back in her chair. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel it. Not satisfaction, not joy. A quiet confirmation. The world functioned as it always had. Structure revealed truth. Time did the rest. That evening, Claire framed her mother's letter and set it on her desk. The final line caught the light. Money reveals. Claire turned off the lamp and stood by the window looking out at the city she had always been part of, even when she didn't know it. Somewhere out there, two people were trying to understand a collapse they thought came from nowhere. Claire understood it perfectly. The first time Claire Walker allowed her name to be spoken aloud in a room full of strangers, it felt like stepping into cold water. Not shocking, clarifying. She sat in the back of the auditorium at a midtown university, lights dimmed low, listening as a dean thanked donors she did not recognize. Her name appeared last on the program, printed in modest type, easy to miss. Eleanor Walker, Scholarship Initiative. The wording had been deliberate. No numbers, no headlines, just a name that sounded like it had always belonged there. When the dean finally said it, there was a ripple in the room. Not applause. Curiosity. Heads turning. Claire did not stand. She stayed seated, hands folded, watching the faces around her shift as people tried to place her. The woman with sensible shoes and a quiet posture did not match whatever picture they had formed in their minds. After the event, a man approached her, slowly, careful not to startle. 60-something, grey hair, a professor's posture. "Your mother would be proud," he said. I knew her. Not well, but enough. Claire smiled politely. She believed in education. She believed in people he corrected gently. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past her windshield. The scholarship announcement would make its way into local papers. Nothing national. Not yet. That was intentional. She wasn't ready to be visible everywhere. Visibility attracted noise. Noise distorted purpose. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into her driveway. David. She let it ring. Then Melissa. Claire silenced the phone and went inside. Over the following weeks, the calls multiplied. Old friends, distant relatives, people who hadn't checked in when her mother died, now wanted to reconnect. Claire listened. She declined politely. She learned how quickly interest bloomed when absence was replaced with possibility. At work, her manager pulled her aside. "I saw your name in the paper," he said, half joking. "Didn't know you were into philanthropy." "Neither did I," Claire replied. He laughed, unsure whether she was serious. The truth was, Claire had never planned to step forward this way. The scholarship had begun as a private directive, a way to honor Eleanor without spectacle. But something had shifted after Melissa's termination, after David's quiet unraveling. Claire saw now that silence, while powerful, could also be a shield for the wrong people. Her mother had hidden for a reason. Claire's reason was different. One afternoon, her attorney called. "There's movement," she said. "Press interest is building. Nothing aggressive. But once the annual filings update, your name will surface." Claire closed her eyes. "Let it," she said. That evening she attended her first public fundraiser, a gala downtown, black tie optional. The room hummed with restrained wealth, the kind that wore itself lightly. Claire chose a simple navy dress, unremarkable by design. She entered alone. She felt them before she saw them. The pause in conversation, the subtle recalibration of attention. David stood near the bar jacket, a little too tight, now his posture tense. Melissa beside him, pale eyes darting. They had come for the same reason everyone else had. To be seen. To belong. When their eyes met Claire's, the recognition was immediate and brutal. Claire did not hesitate. She crossed the room calmly, heels clicking softly against the floor. Each step felt deliberate, earned. "David," she said. Then Melissa. They stood frozen. David recovered first. "Claire," he said. Voice strained. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I'm on the program," Claire replied evenly. Page 6. Melissa swallowed. "We saw the scholarship. We didn't realize." "That's understandable," Claire said. "I didn't either. For a long time." David tried to smile. If I had known Claire's gaze sharpened, not angry, just focused, known what? He faltered. There was no answer that didn't indict him. Melissa stepped forward, desperation cracking her voice. "I'm sorry. Truly. I never wanted to hurt you." Claire studied her. The woman she had trusted. The woman who had folded laundry in her living room, who had cried at her mother's funeral. Claire felt no urge to argue, or punish, or explain. "I believe you," she said. "You wanted what you wanted." Melissa's eyes filled. "We're struggling," she blurted. "Things have been hard." David shot her a look. Claire nodded slowly. Hard has a way of clarifying things. She stepped back, creating space. Enjoy the evening. As she turned away, David reached out. His hand hovered, then dropped. He watched her walk toward a group of board members, waiting to greet her, their faces open, respectful. He saw the ease in her movements, the certainty. It hit him then fully and without mercy. He had never known her at all. The fallout was quiet. No scenes, no public disgrace, just absence. David lost another client, then another. The firm restructured. His name appeared on a list he hadn't expected. Redundant, non-essential. He stared at the word for a long time before understanding it applied to him. Melissa tried to rebuild. Interviews, networking events, smiles stretched thin. The questions followed her. Why the turnover? Why the drop in performance? No one accused. They didn't need to. The record spoke clearly enough. Months passed. Claire moved into a new apartment overlooking the river. Not extravagant, intentional. She spent mornings reviewing proposals, Afternoons mentoring scholarship recipients. Evenings alone, reading, thinking. She slept better now. The weight in her chest had eased, replaced by something steadier. One night, she received a message from an unfamiliar number. David. I see it now. Everything I missed. I'm sorry. Claire read it once. Then again. She did not respond. She framed Eleanor's letter properly at last, setting it where sunlight touched it each morning. The words no longer burned. They guided. At the end of the year, the scholarship doubled. More students, more stories. Lives shifting quietly, profoundly. Claire stood at her window one evening, watching the city breathe. She thought of her mother, of the choice to hide, of the choice to stand. The storm had come just as Eleanor promised. It had taken things, people, illusions. But it had also revealed what mattered. Claire stood straight exactly as she had been taught. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped beneath Claire Walker's door without ceremony. Its envelope heavier than it should have been. No return address. Thick paper. Legal weight. She stood barefoot in her kitchen, coffee cooling untouched on the counter, and stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Experience had taught her something important over the past years. Real consequences never announce themselves loudly. They arrived quietly, pretending to be ordinary. Instead, it was a notice of intent, not a lawsuit yet, a lawsuit, an inquiry, a challenge to the trust structure her mother had built decades earlier. A distant branch of the family she had never met was contesting Eleanor's estate, claiming breach of fiduciary duty, coercion, concealment. The language was careful, polite, predatory. Claire exhaled slowly. So this was the next storm. By noon, she was seated in a private office overlooking the river glass walls, frosting at the edges for privacy. Across from her sat two attorneys she trusted completely. Both older, both unflinching. They had lived long enough to recognize patterns. This was inevitable, one of them said. Your mother expected it. She planned for it. They're testing, the other added, seeing if you'll panic, if you'll settle. Claire's fingers rested lightly on the table. Steady. And if I don't, then it becomes uncomfortable. Public. They'll imply wrongdoing, not criminal, moral. Families always do. Claire nodded. She had seen enough of morality used as a weapon to recognize the shape of it. That evening, she walked alone along the river coat, pulled tight against the wind. The city reflected itself in the dark water, fractured and whole at the same time. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Melissa. Claire almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, she answered. I heard Melissa said, voice, tentative, about the scholarship expanding, about everything. I imagine you have, Claire replied. A pause stretched between them. Traffic hissed nearby. I didn't call for money, Melissa said quickly. I just wanted to say I'm starting over. I took a job out of state. Smaller. Different. That sounds like a decision, Claire said. I don't expect forgiveness, Melissa continued. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what it cost. Claire stopped walking. She watched the water move past, indifferent, relentless. Understanding usually comes late, she said. But it still counts. Melissa's breath hitched. I hope someday you can think of me without anger. Claire considered the question. She searched herself honestly. I don't think about you with anger now, she said. I think about you as someone who made choices, like everyone else." When the call ended, Claire stood still for a long time. She felt no triumph, no regret, just a clean sense of distance. The legal challenge unfolded over months. Letters, filings, interviews conducted through counsel. Claire did not attend hearings. She did not posture. She let the system work exactly as it was designed to. Her mother had chosen that system for a reason. David tried to insert himself into the narrative, once giving an interview to a local outlet about betrayal and hidden lives. The piece ran briefly. It was measured, unimpressive. Readers moved on. There was nothing in it to hold them. His name faded further. He took contract work, short term, no benefits. He moved again. Smaller places, fewer windows. The world did not punish him loudly. It simply stopped making room. The challenge collapsed quietly. Documents surfaced, timelines aligned. Eleanor's intentions stood firm under scrutiny. The trust held. The family withdrew, issuing a statement full of platitudes and retreat. Claire read the final notice without reaction. She closed the folder and set it aside. At the end of the year, she attended a dinner for scholarship recipients. Not a gala, no donors, just students and their families. Folding chairs, homemade desserts, stories told softly. A woman approached her near the end. Late 50s, nervous hands. "My son wouldn't be here without you," she said. "I don't know how to thank someone like you." Claire shook her head gently. "You already did," she said. "You raised him." On the drive home, she thought of Eleanor, of the discipline it must have taken to live small while holding something immense, of the patience, of the restraint. That night, Claire sat at her desk and opened a fresh notebook. She wrote slowly, deliberately. Not plans, principles, what she would fund, what she would never touch, where power would stop and purpose would begin. The city outside her window pulsed with life uncaring of her conclusions. She welcomed that. She no longer needed the world to notice her to know where she stood. When she finally turned off the light, she felt something settle inside her. Not closure, continuity. The storm had not destroyed her. It had refined her. And tomorrow she would keep building quietly, carefully, exactly as she had been taught. The phone rang just after dawn, the sound cutting cleanly through the quiet of Claire Walker's apartment. She reached for it without hurry, already awake, already listening to the city breathe beyond the glass. "This is Claire." "Ms. Walker," the voice said, measured, respectful. "This is Robert Hale, from the State Ethics Commission. We'd like to request a voluntary interview." Claire closed her eyes for a brief second. Not fatigue. Recognition. Another door opening. "Of course," she said. "Have your office coordinate with my counsel." When the call ended, she stood by the window watching the river catch the early light. She had known this would come. Visibility always invited examination. The difference now was that she was no longer afraid of it. The interview took place a week later in a quiet government building with beige walls and neutral furniture designed to calm people who had something to hide. Claire arrived early, dressed simply, carrying nothing but a slim folder. Her attorneys waited outside. This was her choice. The commissioner across from her was a woman in her early 60s, sharp eyes, posture straight, no wasted movement. "This is not an accusation," she said. "It's a review. Your activities intersect with multiple sectors. That draws attention." "I understand," Claire replied. The questions were thorough. Timeline, governance, separation between personal relationships and corporate decisions. Claire answered each one clearly, precisely. No defensiveness, no embellishment. She spoke of process of independence of structures designed long before emotions entered the picture. At one point, the commissioner leaned back. "Your mother was meticulous." "She had to be," Claire said. She understood what happens when power is careless. When the interview ended, the commissioner stood and extended her hand. "You've been careful," she said. "That's rare." Outside, the air felt lighter, not because the risk had passed, but because Claire had faced it directly. She walked 2 blocks before calling her attorney. It went as expected, she said. No surprises. That afternoon, she met with her foundation board. The agenda was long. Expansion proposals, oversight adjustments, a new initiative partnering with community colleges in rural areas that rarely saw private funding. "This isn't about scale," Claire said, when the discussion drifted toward numbers. "It's about durability." They listened. They always did, now. Across town, David sat alone in a rented room scrolling through job listings that blurred together. He paused on one, then another, then closed the browser entirely. His phone buzzed with a reminder he couldn't afford to ignore. Rent due. Again. He thought of Claire more often than he admitted. Not with longing, with confusion. The woman he had left no longer matched the one he saw referenced in articles and programs. He tried to trace the moment he lost her. The truth was, he never saw her clearly enough to know when. Melissa, meanwhile, sat in a modest office in another state, fluorescent lights humming overhead. She was doing work she had once dismissed as beneath her. She did it well. She kept her head down. At night, she replayed old conversations, noticing what she had missed. The cost of charm, the price of shortcuts. Neither of them reached out again. Claire spent her evenings reading proposals and letters from scholarship recipients. Handwritten notes, careful words, gratitude that felt grounded, not transactional. She answered some herself. Others she filed reminders of why restraint mattered. One evening she received a message from the family office, a potential international partnership. Significant, lucrative, questionable. She reviewed the details slowly. Then she declined. "Too opaque," she said. "I don't build on foundations I can't see." The response came back quickly. Understood. Later that night, Claire opened her mother's notebook, the one she had found tucked behind old tax records. The pages were filled with observations, not strategies. Notes about people. Patterns. Warnings written in the margins. One line stood out. Power tests character long before it reveals it. Claire closed the book and sat quietly, letting the words settle. Months passed. The ethics review concluded without finding fault. A brief statement was issued. Dry, procedural. Claire did not comment. She didn't need to. Silence carried more weight now. At a small gathering of educators, a woman approached her with a question that cut deeper than any inquiry. "How do you decide when to step in?" she asked, "and when to let things fall?" Claire considered it. "I ask whether intervention would clarify or conceal," she said. finally. If it conceals, I step back. The woman nodded, absorbing it. On a crisp morning in early fall, Claire visited her mother's grave. No flowers, just presents. The headstone was simple. Eleanor would have insisted. "I'm doing it your way," Claire said softly. "Mostly." The wind moved through the trees, steady, indifferent. Claire stood straight, hands in her coat pockets, breathing evenly. As she turned to leave, her phone vibrated. A message from the foundation team. A rural school district had approved the partnership. First cohort ready. Claire smiled, small and genuine. The story the world told about her had shifted many times over the past years. Victim, heiress, benefactor, operator. None of them fit entirely. She had stopped trying to correct them. What mattered was the work, the quiet alignment of intention and action, the discipline to let consequences unfold without forcing them. That evening, Claire sat at her desk and reviewed the next quarter's agenda. There was more to build, more to protect. She moved through the list calmly, deliberately. Outside, the city lights came on one by one, each a small assertion of presence against the dark. Claire watched them for a moment, then turned back to her work. The storm had passed. The ground had settled, and she remained steady, exactly where she was meant to be. The invitation arrived by courier, heavy cream paper embossed seal, the kind that assumed compliance rather than requested it. Claire Walker read it once, then again, her thumb tracing the raised letters as if they might explain themselves. A closed-door symposium in Chicago. Philanthropy Governance Public Trust. Attendance limited. Her name listed without a title. She set the card down and looked out at the river. The water moved as it always did, indifferent to paper and power. She accepted the invitation without comment. The hotel ballroom was arranged with deliberate restraint. No banners, no sponsors on display. Chairs spaced wider than necessary, encouraging distance thought. Claire took a seat near the aisle. Around her, faces she recognized from filings and footnotes, people accustomed to deciding quietly. Conversations were low, careful. No one wasted words. When the moderator took the podium, the room settled. The agenda unfolded with precision. Case studies, ethical frameworks, failures dissected without names attached. Claire listened attentive, noting what was said and what was avoided. During a break, a man approached her, late 60s. Tailored suit worn easily. His eyes were sharp, curious rather than impressed. "Your mother would have liked this room," he said. Claire met his gaze. She preferred rooms that didn't announce themselves. He smiled. "I knew her briefly. Not by name, by reputation." "That was intentional," Claire replied. They walked together toward windows. "You've done something unusual," he continued. "You let systems work without forcing outcomes." "I let them reveal outcomes," Claire said. He nodded, considering. "That restraint is rare." After lunch, the discussion shifted. The moderator posed a question to the room. At what point does private influence become public responsibility? Silence followed. Not discomfort. Calculation. The moderator's eyes found Claire. "Ms. Walker." The room turned. Claire felt the attention settle, heavy but controlled. She stood slowly, hands relaxed at her sides. When influence alters access, she said. When it changes who gets to stand in the room. Responsibility begins there. A murmur moved through the audience. Not disagreement. Recognition. Afterward, as the room broke into smaller groups, a woman intercepted Claire near the exit. Younger. Confident. Too confident. I represent a coalition interested in partnering on your education initiatives, she said quickly. We can scale your impact significantly. Claire listened. She asked a single question. Who decides where the scale stops? The woman hesitated. We negotiate. Claire nodded once. Then we're not aligned. The woman smiled tightly and moved on. That evening a private dinner followed. Smaller table. Softer light. Conversations deepened. Stories surfaced. Failures admitted without spectacle. Claire spoke little. When she did, it was measured. A man across from her raised his glass. To Eleanor he said simply. The others followed. Claire lifted her glass but did not drink. She thought of her mother's hands, always busy, always steady. The discipline of invisibility. The cost of it. Back in her room, Claire sat by the window, city lights stretching beneath her. Her phone buzzed. David. She stared at the name longer than she expected. When she answered, his voice came through thin, uncertain. I heard you spoke today, he said. In Chicago. Did you, Claire? Asked calmly. A friend sent me a clip, he replied. I didn't know you were doing all this. She said nothing. I wanted to apologize, he continued, for how I handled things, for not seeing. Stop, Claire, said gently. Apologies aren't currency. They don't purchase revision. He exhaled, defeated. I'm trying to understand. That's your work, she replied. The call ended without ceremony. Claire set the phone down and watched the city breathe. Weeks later, the symposium's impact surfaced in quieter ways. Invitations adjusted tone. Requests grew more precise. People approached with proposals framed around alignment rather than leverage. Claire declined most. She accepted a few. At a foundation meeting, a board member raised concern. You're turning away opportunities others would seize. Claire met his eyes. I'm preserving capacity, she said, for when it matters. In another city, Melissa attended a training session at her new job. She listened carefully, took notes, asked questions. When a colleague mentioned Claire's scholarship, Melissa felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Not envy. Awareness. She understood now what she had misread then. Value that didn't announce itself. Strength that didn't ask permission. That understanding did not absolve her. It anchored her. David accepted a short-term contract that paid less than his last permanent role. He worked hard. He kept his head down. When colleagues spoke about market shifts and unseen forces, he listened more than he spoke. He no longer assumed the world owed him space. Claire returned home and resumed her routines. Early mornings, long walks, careful reading. She expanded the Foundation's oversight committee, inviting critics as well as supporters. Transparency, she had learned, was not a performance. It was an architecture. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a student in a rural district. Handwritten, crooked lines, gratitude expressed without polish. Claire read it twice, then once more, slower. She placed it beside her mother's framed letter and sat back. The storm had changed shape. It no longer tore. It tested. Claire welcomed that. Tests refined. They revealed where structures held and where they needed reinforcement. As dusk settled, Claire closed her laptop and stood by the window. The river caught the last light, a thin line of gold threading through shadow. She breathed in, steady. Somewhere beyond the city, decisions were being made that would never include her name. That was fine. Influence did not require recognition. It required intention. Claire turned from the window and prepared for the next day. There was work to do. Not loud work. Not dramatic work. Work that endured. She had learned at last the difference between standing in the storm and becoming it. The call came from a number Claire Walker did not recognize, which was exactly why she answered it. Unknown calls had a way of carrying truth unfiltered by familiarity. Ms. Walker. A man said, his voice careful practiced. My name is Jonathan Pierce. I represent the board of a regional manufacturing group. We've been advised to speak with you directly. Claire leaned back in her chair, eyes on the river beyond her window. Advised by whom? There was a pause. By people who understand how you prefer to operate. She waited. Silence had become a tool she used without effort. We're facing a closure, Jonathan continued. 2 plants, nearly 800 jobs. The numbers don't work not on paper. And off paper, Claire asked. Another pause. Off paper these towns disappear. Claire closed her eyes briefly. She saw her mother's hands, again cracked from work, steady with purpose. She opened them. Send the materials, she said. Everything. The files arrived within the hour. Balance sheets, deferred maintenance, pension obligations kicked down the road, a familiar story told with different fonts. Claire read through the night, annotating margins, mapping pressure points. By dawn, she understood what the board could not admit to itself. This wasn't a failure of demand. It was a failure of patience. She convened a call that afternoon. No video. Voices only. Board members spoke in turns, defensive at first, then wary. Claire asked questions that cut through rehearsed answers. She didn't accuse. She clarified. You've optimized for quarterly optics, she said calmly, and hollowed out the spine. Jonathan cleared his throat. Are you proposing an acquisition? I'm proposing continuity, Claire replied. With conditions. The conditions were simple and brutal. Capital for modernization tied to workforce retention. Independent oversight. No dividend extraction until productivity gains were realized. A timeline measured in years, not quarters. This would reduce our flexibility, one board member said. It would restore your credibility, Claire answered. The vote passed narrowly. Relief followed, then fear. Claire recognized both. Fear was healthy. It meant they understood the weight of what they had agreed to. The announcement was handled carefully. No promises, no triumph, just a commitment to stay. Local papers covered it with cautious optimism. People read between the lines. Staying mattered. Claire did not attend the press conference. She never did. The next week, she traveled to one of the towns unannounced, a diner off the highway, coffee refilled without question. She listened as people talked about shifts and schools and the quiet math of survival. No one recognized her. That, too, was intentional. At the counter, a woman with tired eyes mentioned the plant. "They say it's not closing now," she said, not daring to hope. "We'll see." Claire paid and left without comment. Outside, the air smelled like oil and rain. She breathed it in. Back home, the foundation inbox overflowed. Praise, criticism, requests that assumed entitlement. Claire sorted them with the same discipline she applied to ledgers. Intention first, alignment second. Everything else fell away. David's name surfaced again in a context Claire did not expect. A former colleague mentioned him during a call offhand, almost apologetic. "He's applying for a role in compliance," the man said. "Says he wants something steadier." Claire felt no surge of feeling, just a small note made in the back of her mind. People changed when options narrowed. Sometimes it lasted. Melissa sent a message weeks later. Not a plea, not an apology. A link to an article about workforce training in rural regions. "Thought you might find this useful." Claire read the piece, saved it, and replied with a single word. "Thank you." The manufacturing group's first quarterly review arrived with mixed results. Gains in efficiency, losses in margin, exactly as projected. The board sounded uneasy. Claire did not adjust course. "Trust the arc," she said, or step aside. They trusted it. A month later, a whistleblower email landed in the Foundation's secure channel. Not about her, about a partner organization misreporting outcomes to attract additional funding. The evidence was thorough. The tone restrained. Claire convened an emergency session. The room was tense. Some argued for discretion, quiet correction, avoiding headlines. "No," Claire said. "We don't conceal this." They froze. She continued, voice even. "We disclose, withdraw funding, and refer the matter. Accountability is the point, not the aftermath. The fallout was immediate. Angry calls, threats of reputational damage." Claire stood firm. The story broke and moved on. The Foundation's credibility did not suffer. It hardened. That evening, Claire sat alone, the weight of the day settling into her bones. She poured tea and opened her mother's notebook again, flipping to a page she had read many times. A sentence underlined twice. "Integrity is what remains when no one is watching." She closed the book and smiled faintly. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the riverbanks, softening edges. Claire walked each morning, boots crunching, breath visible. She felt the work in her body now. Not strain, purpose. An invitation arrived from the manufacturing group. Not a gala, a site visit. They wanted her to see the changes. She agreed. The plant floor was loud alive. New equipment gleamed beside old. Workers moved with a rhythm that had been missing before. A foreman explained adjustments with pride held in check. Claire asked about safety first, training second, output last. When she left, a man approached her quietly. "My daughter starts college next fall," he said. "First in our family." Claire nodded. "Tell her to stand straight." He laughed, unsure why his throat tightened. On the drive back, Claire thought about storms again, how they cleared air, how they exposed weak beams, how rebuilding was never glamorous, but always necessary. At home, she reviewed the next tranche of investments and paused at one line item, a small fund focused on vocational education. Undervalued, underestimated. She marked it for deeper review. The work was far from over. It never would be. Claire understood that. Now, power was not a destination. It was a responsibility renewed each day. Outside, snow fell harder, muffling the city. Claire watched it for a moment, then returned to her desk. She did not hurry. There was time, and she intended to use it well. The warning did not come from a lawyer or a board member. It came from a janitor. Claire Walker noticed him the third time she visited the renovated manufacturing plant, a quiet man in his late 60s who moved slowly along the perimeter long after tours ended. While executives debated timelines and metrics, he wiped down railings. No one else touched his movements, deliberate, practiced. As Claire walked toward the exit, he spoke without looking up. "You should be careful here." She stopped. The echo of machinery hummed behind them. "About what?" He straightened with effort, resting his weight on the mop handle. His eyes were clear. Too clear. "About who gets nervous when things start working." Claire studied him. "What makes you say that? I've been in this building 42 years, he said. "I've seen upgrades. I've seen shutdowns. I've seen promises." He glanced toward the offices above the floor. "This time is different. Different makes people nervous." She waited. "There's a consultant coming through next week," he continued. "External. Says he's here to evaluate risk, but he's not looking at machines." "What is he looking at?" Claire asked. "Ownership," the man said simply. Claire thanked him and walked out into the cold air. She didn't hurry back to her car. She didn't call anyone immediately. She replayed the conversation, listening for exaggeration. There was none. Just observation. By the time she reached home, the outline had formed. The consultant's name appeared the next morning in her briefing packet. Private, well-connected, known for restructuring recommendations that ended in asset sales. He had worked with firms that profited quietly when others collapsed loudly. Claire called the family office. "Pull his last 5 engagements," she said. And who benefited? The list came back by afternoon. Patterns emerged. Pension funds stripped, towns hollowed. Decision-makers rotated out with golden parachutes intact. Claire closed the file and made a single note. Preempt. The board call that evening was tense. Voices overlapped. The consultant's presence had unsettled them already. Claire listened, then spoke. "You don't need him," she said calmly. "And you shouldn't let him define your narrative." One member bristled. "He's been retained by a minority stakeholder." "We don't control that. You control access," Claire replied. "And information." She laid out the plan without raising her voice. Transparency before suspicion. Independent audit released early. Workforce data made public. Community representatives included in oversight. The consultant would find no shadows to work in. Silence followed. Then agreement. Reluctant, but real. The consultant arrived to a building already lit from within. He asked his questions. He received thorough answers. He found no leverage. His final report was inconclusive. He left without ceremony. The janitor nodded to Claire as she passed him on her way out. "Told you," he said. Back in the city, pressure came from another direction. A foundation partner requested a private meeting. Urgent, the email said. Claire agreed. The man who sat across from her the next day wore confidence like armor. He spoke smoothly, framing his concerns as advice. "Your visibility is creating friction," he said. "Some donors are uneasy. They prefer quieter stewardship." Claire folded her hands. "Uneasy about what?" "About precedent," he said. "You're setting one." She leaned forward slightly. "Precedent for what?" He hesitated. "For accountability." Claire nodded. "Then the unease is appropriate." He tried a different angle. "There are ways to soften the message. Delay disclosures. Redirect attention." "No," Claire said. He exhaled, irritation slipping through. "You're risking alliances." "I'm clarifying them," she replied. The partnership ended 2 weeks later. The foundation absorbed the loss without comment. David heard about it through a mutual contact and laughed bitterly. "She's burning bridges," he said. "She always did that when she thought she was right." The man across from him didn't laugh. "She's not burning bridges," he said. "She's choosing which ones lead somewhere." David went quiet. Melissa watched the same story unfold from a distance. She recognized the names now, understood the stakes. She saw finally how Claire had never needed spectacle, only alignment. The next challenge arrived in the form of legislation. A proposed bill aimed at tightening regulations around private foundations, framed as transparency laced with provisions that favored large institutional players. Claire read the draft carefully. She saw who would benefit, who would be edged out. She didn't oppose it publicly. Instead, she convened a working group. Former regulators, rural educators, small foundation leaders. They mapped the consequences quietly and shared them with the right offices. The bill stalled. Amendments followed. The most damaging clauses dissolved. Claire did not claim credit. She didn't need to. Late one evening, she received an email from a name she hadn't seen in years. Her mother's maiden name. A distant relative who had once challenged the estate. "I was wrong," the message read. "I see now what she was protecting." Claire closed the laptop and sat in the dark, letting the city's glow spill across the room. She thought of Eleanor again, of the patience it took to plant seeds whose harvest she would never see. The following week, the manufacturing group reported its first net positive quarter in nearly a decade. Modest, real. The towns noticed. So did the markets. Claire walked the river path that morning, breath steady, steps even. She felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper, not heavier, just more integrated. At her desk, she found a handwritten note waiting. No return address. You stood when others leaned away. That matters. She set it beside her mother's letter and allowed herself a moment of stillness. The world was testing her now, not with betrayal, but with consequence. This was the harder trial. Not surviving the storm, but deciding what to do with the ground it left behind. Claire reached for her pen and began outlining the next phase. The morning light reached Claire Walker's desk before the city fully woke, pale and deliberate, catching the edges of paper and glass. She stood still for a moment, hands resting on the back of the chair, listening to the building settle. Elevators hummed. Somewhere a door closed softly. The world was moving again, as it always did, and she was ready for it. The manufacturing group's report lay open margins marked in pencil. Progress without theatrics. Jobs stabilized. Training funded. A spine rebuilt. Claire turned the page and felt the quiet satisfaction of work done properly. Not finished. Properly. There was a difference. Her phone vibrated once. A message from the foundation team confirming the next cohort. Rural districts. Community colleges. Apprenticeships paired with tuition support. She replied with a single word. Approved. By mid-morning, she was in a conference room with windows facing the river, meeting with an oversight committee she had personally assembled to disagree with her. They spoke plainly. They challenged assumptions. They questioned timelines. Claire welcomed it. Power that could not withstand friction did not deserve to be held. When the meeting ended, an older man lingered. Former regulator. Weathered eyes. You've changed the temperature, he said. Not the room. The temperature. Claire considered that. Temperature determines what survives, she replied. He nodded and left. Across town, David Walker sat at a small desk reviewing compliance documentation for a firm that paid him hourly and expected precision. He did the work carefully, thoroughly. He no longer rushed. There was nothing to chase now, only standards to meet. When his supervisor corrected a minor error, David thanked him and fixed it without defensiveness. He had learned too late, but not uselessly, what unearned certainty cost. Melissa Grant stood in a training facility 2 states away, watching a group of new hires practice procedures she once waved through. She corrected gently. She listened more than she spoke. When someone asked her how she learned to slow down, she said, "By losing what I thought speed would protect." Neither of them contacted Claire again. They didn't need to. Their lives were no longer entangled with hers. Consequences had finished their work and moved on. In the afternoon, Claire walked to the river. The water was high, catching sunlight in fractured lines. She watched a barge move upstream, steady and unhurried, and thought of Eleanor, of restraint mistaken for absence, of strength mistaken for smallness. Her mother had understood something most people never did. Control was not loud, it was patient. A courier delivered a thin envelope as Claire returned to her office. Inside was a simple note from a partner organization she had turned down months earlier. "We restructured. We are ready to align if you are." Claire smiled faintly and set it aside. Readiness was not declared. It was demonstrated. As dusk approached, Claire reviewed a final item on her list, a vocational fund she had flagged weeks earlier. Undervalued, underestimated. She authorized a modest entry paired with strict reporting. No announcements, no press. Impact first. She closed the file and leaned back, letting the day's weight settle. It felt integrated now, not heavy. Purpose had a way of redistributing strain. When night fell, the city lights came on one by one, a constellation of intention against the dark. Claire stood by the window, hands in her pockets, breathing evenly. She thought of the janitor's warning and the consultant's retreat, of legislation stalled and partnerships clarified, of storms that arrived not to destroy, but to test load-bearing truths. She returned to her desk and straightened the frame, holding her mother's letter. The final line caught the lamplight steady and sure. Stand straight. Claire sat down and opened a fresh document outlining the next year. Education, workforce continuity, transparent governance. Nothing glamorous. Everything essential. She typed slowly, choosing words that would endure scrutiny. Outside traffic softened into a distant hush. Inside resolve sharpened. The story that had begun with loss had become something else entirely. Not a redemption. Not a victory. A transfer. Of discipline. Of purpose. Of a way of standing that did not require applause. Claire saved the document and turned off the lamp. As she left the office, she paused at the doorway and looked back once, not with nostalgia, but with acknowledgement. The work would continue tomorrow. It always would. If this story resonated with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment, stand your ground.